Happy New Year and welcome to our first TA call for 2024. Because this is the first call of the new year, we thought it would be a great opportunity for Glenna Wright-Gallo, our OSER's Assistant Secretary, to talk to you about her priorities. But before we do that, we want to introduce you to the newest member of our team, RSA Commissioner Dante Allen. After he is introduced, he and Carol Doback, who is the Deputy Commissioner for RSA, will discuss opportunities for SEAs and state VR agencies to collaborate. So let's get this started. I will turn the call over first to Valerie Williams, our OSEP Director, to introduce Dante. Valerie?
Thank you so much, Greg. And before I introduce Dante, which I am actually chomping at the bit to do because I'm very excited that he's with us, just reflecting over all that's gone on in the last year, all of the work that has been done, it has dawned on me in thinking about the work and in traveling across the country in different states and districts that we all do really want the same thing. We all really want the best outcomes. And that everyone is getting to a mode where we're all really digging into our data and trying to figure out where the gaps are, where the barriers are, how can we solve our problems, how can we be helpful to each other. And I feel like the words that are going to define the work that we do and have defined it are partnership and collaboration, which is extremely important. Everyone here knows that we cannot operate in a silo, dealing with the typical stakeholders that we've always dealt with. There needs to be more partnership and collaboration, and we are all moving toward that together. And that is very exciting to me. Greg asked me about New Year's resolutions, and I don't tend to make resolutions. I think almost by definition, a resolution is something you decide to do, and by the end of January, early February, you've kind of fallen off the wagon, right? So I tend to not make resolutions, but I aim to improve and make good habits. And so the habits that I want us to focus on here are continuing to be urgent, to be consistent, and to be responsive. And that's what I'm looking for us to continue to do here in OSEP and in RSA for sure, because I'm sure our partners feel the same way. So I am going to introduce our brand new commissioner in RSA, Dante Allen. He has literally been with us, has maybe a month, I'm not quite sure. We were starting to lose hope, and then it turned out to be a Christmas miracle that we found out that he actually was going to come our way and work with us. So we're all very excited about that. Dante, you have the floor to introduce yourself and share whatever it is you would like to share.
Thank you, Valerie, and good afternoon, everyone. My pleasure to be here with you. I haven't quite made a month yet. I think I made my first appearance into the office on December 18th. So I'm in my fourth week, if that helps at all, to give you an idea of where I am in this process. I am joining you all from California, which is where I was born and raised. But we'll be making that transition to Washington, D.C. in the next couple of weeks. And so I'm in the midst of looking for a place and doing all that. But in the meantime, I've been getting to know the OSER's team, especially the RSA folks that I will be working with on a daily basis. The thing that has struck me in joining the Department of Education is that this idea of collaboration is not just lip service, that it is very much a fundamental. And not only are we saying that we want to do it, we strive to do it, but we're actually taking steps to make that a reality. And part of what I hope that we can spend some time this afternoon talking about. Just to give you a little bit of information about my background, my first exposure to vocational rehabilitation was that of a consumer. I'm a person with a disability, and first interacted with the California Department of Rehabilitation fresh out of college. I had received my first job and met with vocational rehabilitation counselors to work on a number of things, but the most important was helping me to acquire transportation to and from work. And it's the perspective that I learned as a vocational rehabilitation counselor that I plan to bring to the work that I'll be doing with RSA, recognizing the impact that that lives can be changed. And I firmly believe that had I not had the support of the California Department of Rehabilitation, that I wouldn't have made many of the steps in my career, and most likely certainly wouldn't be talking to you this afternoon, leading the nation's vocational rehabilitation system. So it is a pleasure to be here, a pleasure to work with folks like Valerie and the rest of the team, and am very happy to get started in this work. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm sure the stakeholders that we have here will be hearing a lot more from you as we do more work together in RSA and OSEP, and we start talking about some of the things that are near and dear to OSERs broadly and our specific roles in it. I'm going to pull in Carol. So everyone is probably aware, we sent out an email yesterday that was about the state level WIOA plans that are currently being put together. And well, a couple things. One, talking about we want to convey the need for more collaboration between the SEAs and the state VR agencies, but specifically around the WIOA state plans that are being put together right now. So I just wanted to turn it over to Carol so that she can talk a little bit about those plans, the possibilities and opportunities for collaboration. And this is all very time sensitive because those plans are due fairly soon. And so we did not want to wait until the last minute and cross our fingers and hope that everyone got together. We wanted to provide a nudge and give some more information around what that collaboration could and should look like. So go ahead, Carol.
Sure. And first of all, I'd like to say that, Valerie, I like your approach to the new year, rather than quote resolutions, one of forming good habits. And I hope that collaboration certainly is one of those good habits that, to the extent you may not as an SEA be doing that yet with your VR agents. Let's just say I would hope that if I asked all of you to raise your hands if you are collaborating with your VR agency colleagues, that you could all do so. But if that's not the case, this is a good time to start forming that good habit. And for those of you who already are in the process of engaging in those good habits of collaboration with the VR agencies and your colleagues there, that these suggestions we have for you around the WIOA state planning process and the touch points there for you with your VR agencies, that these give you ideas on ways you can further strengthen the collaboration and good habits you're already engaging in. So as Valerie said, we are in the process, or the VR agencies are in the process of finalizing their Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act state plans for the fiscal years 2024 through 2027. These are 4-year state plans. And in a way, that's a good thing to remember as we talk through some of these particular activities to engage in, because they apply not just to the formulation of the state plan, but they're also points of engagement throughout the life of that plan. And the plans are due in March or early April. There have been some states that have asked for some extensions, and that's okay. But the goal is for the Departments of Labor and the Departments of Education to jointly approve those state plans by June 30th. So we have approximately 90 days in which to do that. Now, as these plans are developing, they afford, again, not only points in which you can engage in their process, but they also, through the VR or vocational rehabilitation services portion of the state plan, provide ways in which you can actually highlight the great work that you're already doing or that you are planning to implement with the VR agencies in order to support transition of students with disabilities. So the first touch point we have in the state plan is as you serve as a member of the state rehabilitation councils, this affords you a couple of opportunities for collaboration around state planning. First of all, the SRCs are asked to comment on the content of the state plan. I hope you've already engaged in that process or that it is underway right now in your states. If it's not, please be reaching out to your state agency as a member of the SRC or even outside of that and saying, look, I want to review your state plan. I want to know, I want to be able to contribute to the work that we're doing around transition as it's reflected in the state plan and the VR services portion of the plan. Your service on that council certainly is not just at this point in time, but out throughout the life of the plan. So please take opportunities then to serve actively with your VR agencies and your colleagues on the SRC to inform the VR program and the activities that are undertaken in your states to support transition. There's also a portion of work that's reflected in the state plan called the Comprehensive Statewide Needs Assessment. That's a process that the VR agencies get engaged in every 3 years, and it is meant to assess the needs for VR services for individuals in the state, including the needs of students with disabilities for transition and pre-employment transition services. The information you have to share can really help to inform that needs assessment process and the goals and strategies that will be based on the information obtained through that process. There's the comprehensive system personnel development. We know VR counselors and other professionals in the VR field are required to meet certain personnel standards under the Rehabilitation Act. And that is a place that they're asked to describe that activity, but also describe professional development needs for the VR counselors, and very specifically with respect to the delivery of services under the IDEA. So please contribute to a review of that portion of the plan and help the VR agencies understand your perspectives with respect to those needs. There is the development of goals and strategies. Work with your VR agencies to help inform goals and strategies very specific to the delivery of transition services, pre-employment transition services, and the outcomes that you would expect to see as a result of the implementation of those goals and strategies. Again, the outcomes will be reported in another portion of the VR services portion of the plan. And your work there will be very helpful in driving strength in transition and pre-employment transition services delivery in your states. Finally, there is a very specific portion or description in the VR services plan, which is all about the collaboration and coordination between VR agencies with educational agencies. There's a part of that description which goes into the content of the formal interagency agreements that the VR agencies establish with you in the SEAs that provide the framework for transition planning and the delivery of transition and pre-employment transition services in your state. So the stronger those plans, the more robust those plans in terms of those contents, the more that framework can be highlighted and described in the VR services portion of the plan, as well as not just those formal requirements, but there's plenty of room in that description to really describe the activities that you and the VR agencies are collaborating on in order to strengthen the delivery of pre-employment and other transition services in your state, so that students with disabilities can move seamlessly and confidently into post-school activities in post-secondary education and training and competitive integrated employment. So those are just a few areas in which the great work that all of you are doing in the field with your VR agencies can be highlighted, or in which you can inform that work through the state plan process. And that's what yesterday's communication was all about. So I really hope all of you take that to heart and are going to be reaching out to your VR agency colleagues to the extent you haven't yet, or they haven't yet engaged with you. This is a two-way partnership. So there's responsibilities on both sides for driving this collaboration. And this is just one very specific way in which that activity can be engaged in and highlighted. So I think now, Valerie, if there's time, if there's any questions about that, we can hear from them, or people can certainly, I think, write into their state leads, et cetera, with their questions, and we'll be glad to respond to them as well.
Perfect. Okay, unless any questions happen to come to our attention, we will probably wait until some questions come in at a later date, which I'm sure that they will after people have a chance to kind of think things over and what their role is. I want to, Carol and Dante, I absolutely want to thank you for taking time to get on today. You are more than welcome to stay. I also want to let everyone who's on here know that we are having these same conversations with state VR agencies.
Oh, yes.
So that they can be aware of not only what is transpiring, but the fact that they should be partnering and collaborating with the state special education folks as well. So this is a team effort. Just as Carol said, we are looking to partner and collaborate. And what we're going to do is we are going to model what we expect to see at the state level. And I meant to tell you, Carol, earlier, there were a lot of thumbs up and hearts when you were talking about partnership and collaboration. So
oh, terrific. And thank you for all that you're doing in this area of work. It's so important, and it's very exciting. And just to underscore what Valerie said about our communications with the VR agencies, they heard the same message from Dante and me when we engaged with our VR agencies through the CSA VR call with the Council of State Administrators of Vocational Rehabilitation on Tuesday. I think we have spread the message wide and far, and we're just looking for some great things to come out of it. So thank you very much again for all you're doing. And I will be leaving the call, but I look forward to responding to any of the questions that anyone may have in follow-up. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dante. I greatly appreciate your time as well.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Okay, so we are going to transition to the second part of our call today, which is the one and only Assistant Secretary of OSEP, Glenna Gallo, right? And so I have a host of questions for you, Glenna. Some people have heard you speak. They know who you are. They know what your priorities are. Others possibly not so much, but this is an opportunity, seeing as how it's the beginning of the year. We want to make sure that everyone is aware of what the priorities are here at the department, what your priorities are, how they all feed into each other, and how we'll be laser focused on certain things here at the department in OSEP. So we wanted to have you on at the beginning of the year so that we could all move forward together in lockstep. So I have questions for you.
Great.
My first question is, well, on a completely random note, how were your holidays?
So thank you, Valerie. I had great holidays. I hope everybody else did too. I am in the fortunate position that my children are in their 20s now, and which really kind of changes the holidays, right? Like it changes the focus and the pace, and you have to start doing things with significant others, right? And scheduling around different families, which adds a new twist to it. I really took time to rest and relax and regroup. But I think overall, kind of the main tradition that we have is just spending some quality time together. We're very much a board game family. And so one of the things that we do every holiday season is find a new board game. So the one that we did this season was Abduction. I don't know if anyone on here has played that, but it is a strategy game where you're playing on your board and your opponent's board. So you're not only trying to create strategy for yourself, you're trying to disarm their strategy, which was a great thing to do.
What's the name of that game again? Abduction?
Abduction, and it's
Okay.
like a duck with little ducks, like little
Okay.
colored ducks that are in a UFO, and you pull out random colors and have to
Oh.
move them around. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up. We started playing, for those who remember the game has been around for quite some time and is still around, Operation. And so my son he's trying to play it and he's trying to figure out how to not make the buzzer go off, but it's great for trying to work on those fine motor skills. But it's a game, so it feels like it's a lot of fun, and just we had a really good time playing that, as well as Uno. Everyone in my household does not know how to play without cheating, but that is a whole nother story I won't get into right now. So yeah, I think we all love games and just the opportunity to pretty much slow down the pace and rejuvenate a little bit and get ready for the work that we have ahead. So, okay, very good. I'm going to have to look up that game. For those that don't know, you are not from the nation's capital. You moved here when you were confirmed. So what are some of the unique events or things that you've experienced since you've been here?
So I am a West Coast girl. That is where I've spent the majority of my life. And moved here after living for the last few decades in Utah, with about 5 years in Washington State, and then returning back to my native Las Vegas. One of the things that I have done is public transportation. So I would say I have always lived in the suburbs, and I'm living in kind of a downtown area and needing to take the metro. I didn't bring a car, so that's really changed my lifestyle. But then also just getting to see historical places, kind of as a routine thing. Like I don't know that it ever changes to come in on the metro and see the Washington Monument every morning with the sun rising in the background. Having the opportunity to be at the White House and see the holiday decorations has also been key. And then I am fortunate enough to be the only domestic presidential appointee who is from Las Vegas. So anytime anything newsworthy is celebrated at the White House around Las Vegas, I have an opportunity to participate. So Vegas has been winning sports championships in women's basketball and men's hockey. And that has been part of my official responsibilities as well.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And I know there's always an adventure when you're on the metro. So we're not even going to go down that road. Always an adventure on public transportation. You've been in your role for about 246 days, not that we're counting at all. But before developing the priorities that you're going to share with those that are listening today, what were among some of the top goals that you want to accomplish, and which of them remain on your priority list?
Great. I think that the things that I came into this position wanting to accomplish are things that are top of mind for most of the people on this call. As a former state director of special ed, working at a district level, as well as a classroom teacher, there are certain things that really drive our work and why we engage in this work. The first is to maintain that focus on outcomes and the needs of individuals with disabilities of all ages, right? Like that is why we really care deeply about this work. Another thing, again, since I've had experience and an opportunity to implement things at a variety of levels, has been when we look at policies, policy development, policy selection, what is it that needs to happen for quality implementation? And will that achieve the intended outcome that we selected that policy to do? That was something I came in really thinking about. And then the third one was really stakeholder engagement. How is it that we take everybody who really cares about the work and is contributing to the work and the outcomes and the changes and policies and funding, and how do we coalesce with them in order to make improvements rather than to admire problems or rehash things that should have already been moved ahead. And so those are the three things that, I've always thought about in my work in the disability arena. And I think I always will think about.
I like that. I know I think about some of the things that literally keep me up at night sometimes, big picture, are how do we create that true systemic change so that regardless of the involvement or bandwidth of our students with disabilities parents, right? Because there are some parents that have the time and bandwidth to research and pull in the right people and do that kind of thing. But for the parents that don't have that bandwidth, how do we make sure that the system is still operating in the best interests of our students? And when that happens, independent of family involvement, I think we'll know that we're actually getting somewhere. So that, big picture, those are some of the things that literally I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about. So tell us that, you started out with the big picture of what you were thinking before you came. And now that you're here and you've had a chance to look around and kind of see what's going on and what you want to lean into and where you want to impact change, can you tell us how you selected and shaped the final priorities that you came up with and what they are?
Definitely. And Greg, if you don't mind going to the next slide after this, let's put those priorities up. Perfect. Thank you. I think that as we go into any new job, we go in with kind of perceived or perceptions about what needs to happen, what is happening, and you really have an opportunity to verify what your perceptions are and adjust those based on more information, data, and other, expanded feedback opportunities as well as exploration. And that's really kind of the opportunity that we used, was kind of the catalyst of me joining the OSERS team and the ed leadership team to examine, what is the mission that we're all working on. And for OSERS, we're working to improve early childhood education and employment outcomes and raise expectations for all people with disabilities, their families, their communities, and the nation. And that really resonates with me, and I think we can boil it down to improve outcomes and raise expectations. And when we talk about individuals with disabilities, we're talking about individuals with disabilities of all ages. So the infants and toddlers, school age population, youth, and adults. So coming into it, looking at that, looking at data, looking at the great things that are happening, as well as the areas where we have some gaps. And I think that's really important to recognize that we have great things happening and we have gaps. Somebody once said, and I don't remember who it is, but it has been since I've been here at OSERS, that, the law is really comprehensive and there's so many things that could go wrong with implementation. And there's so many things that could go right with implementation. And so I think making sure that we have that measured approach. What we did then was we started really looking at where are we seeing things that we need to improve. And I started kind of identifying kind of basic buckets, for lack of a better term, of things that we wanted to focus on. And then we started having conversations across ed with other agencies, with our own teams here at OSERS, talking with OSEP staff, RSA staff, talking with advocacy groups and other stakeholders, and coming back and refining those and refining those. And that's where you see the priorities that are in front of you now. Really, we're looking at equity, right? It's all about equity when we think about the needs of individuals with disabilities. It's about equity, it's about access, and it's about making progress and improving outcomes. So to do that, we are really focused, and we're looking at not only policies, but resource investments, as well as attention and information dissemination around these 5 main areas. First of all, we have to have a prepared workforce, whether that's working with infants and toddlers, whether it's working with school age personnel, whether it's working with adults and getting them ready for competitive integrated employment. We have to have personnel who are appropriately trained and who represent the communities that they're serving, whether those are educators, whether they're providers, whether they're instructional support personnel. So we're focusing on that. Second is we have to have evidence-based practices. And I'm really going to boil it down to this. We can't talk about improved outcomes and never talk about instruction and evidence-based practices. If we're relying on the law as our talking points and we're focusing only on the law, then we're missing out the key concept behind the law, which is to improve outcomes. And whether we're talking, again, infants and toddlers, in which we're looking at developmental practices, right, and family engagement, whether we're looking at instruction for the school age population, or providing accommodations and preparing adults for work and youth for work, all of that's going to come down to like this concept of, what I'm calling instruction around evidence-based practices, whether it's instruction, intervention, services, or supports. Third is accessible technology. That can be broad. Do we have accessible materials? Do we have accessible technology? Are we using those the most appropriate and effective and efficient way? And are we preparing our individuals with disabilities to engage in the community effectively with the materials that they have available to them? Stakeholders, this is a long-standing practice, right? But how is it that we engage everyone who contributes to the community that surrounds an individual with a disability and get them to partner with us around making improved outcomes and changing the system. And it takes a village, right? Like, I think we all know that. We tend to, a lot of times as special educators, try to do everything ourselves in isolation. And we know that that doesn't create the most well-rounded, effective system, nor does it really improve the environment around us and in our communities. And then last but not least, how do we use resources in a strategic manner that addresses the needs that we've identified? And so are we looking at the resources? Are we making data informed and aligned decisions? And are we really looking at that long-term goal, which is competitive integrated employment? So those are the priorities that we're focused on here at OSERS. You're going to hear, some differences when you talk about OSEP. They'll talk about the ways things feed into those priorities, and the same for RSA. But hopefully, whatever aspect you're looking at that, whether you're a Part C provider or leader, a Part B provider or leader, or a state voc rehab or an IHE, right? All of those should resonate with you, and you should see how those are going to improve outcomes and further the work that you're doing.
Thank you. That was a mouthful, but also very comprehensive for anybody who wants to know what are your priorities and what direction we're all moving in. That completely answered the question. And I love to see hearts go up when you talk. Can you tell us how the priorities that you just mentioned, how they kind of align with and feed into the Secretary's Raise the Bar initiative?
Of course. And I am so sorry the sun has decided to peek out and reflect off the building across the way from me here. But Greg, if you could just go back one slide and let's look at the Secretary's Raise the Bar priorities. So while Greg moves that slide, Secretary Cardona has his Raise the Bar, Lead the World initiative with three main priority areas, right? Achieve academic excellence, boldly improve learning conditions, and create pathways for global engagement. And you can see the subcategories under those. But what I think it comes down to is when we look at this is that expectations for all students, for all children, for all youth are expectations for children, infants, and youth with disabilities. And so I don't think there's anything on there that we disagree with and that we wouldn't be willing to support. Accelerate learning for every student. We know that as part of an IFSP or an IEP or as a transition plan, we want to make sure that we provide comprehensive services that address their needs and allow them to make growth. We know that we want comprehensive and rigorous education opportunities for every child. We want the educator shortage, the provider shortage to be eliminated. And we also want to make sure that schools and work environments and service delivery places are safe and that the needs of staff and students and children, mental health and well-being are being addressed. And then I think when we look at create pathways for global engagement, as a parent, I always think about what is that pathway to college and career that my children have. And how is it that we look at that starting at the youngest levels, right? So starting with infants and toddlers and going up through school age, how is it that we're building a system that provides the instructional supports that allows children with disabilities to make the progress academically, socially, with communications, all of those skills to have and access multiple pathways to college and career? And a career that's really competitive, integrated employment, right? And we want people to be prepared for not only that CIE, that competitive integrated employment, but to really have opportunities that they're passionate about, to continue to be lifelong learners and to be able to access and use assistive technology and accommodations that allow them to be successful. So those, oh, sorry, Valerie, I was going to say those feed into our priorities and the work that we're doing, but I think they also feed into yours. I can't imagine that anyone who's on this call is thinking like, nope, not going to worry about academic excellence, right? So I just encourage you to kind of think about those and think like, are there gaps in what I'm leading for? Is there something that I'm not addressing that I need to address? And encourage you to collaborate with partners in your agencies, in your organizations to really strengthen those pathways.
Thank you. I love that. So I want to pull a thread on a couple of things that you mentioned a little bit more, because sometimes I think it's helpful for us to connect the dots. I think a lot of this is connected, and these are not necessarily discrete individual one-off topics. They literally are connected. Something that you mentioned, the staffing shortages. We acknowledge that there are severe staffing shortages across the country. What role do you feel that OSEP can play in addressing those personnel shortages?
So I think OSEP, like to use a phrase that you used, right, can connect the dots across the federal government, but also with resources. So we know that states are provided with IDA funds, and one of the things that they can use those IDA funds is to address staffing shortages. I think though, in addition to that, there's other resources that can be used federally to address educator shortages. Not only fiscal resources, but technical assistance, evidence-based resources, as well as opportunities to really connect between local governments, institutes of higher education or training opportunities, as well as state educational agencies and LEAs. And I think that OSEP has focused on addressing the educator shortage for many years. They've funded technical assistance centers, they've funded summits and other activities to address the educator shortage. One of the things that I'm concerned about, though, is that although we don't have quality data around special education educator shortage that is available nationally, many states do have that available to them, and districts definitely do. We don't seem to be making adequate progress on addressing the shortage. It's something that we're really looking at. What is it through traditional and non-traditional alternative educator prep programs can we replicate? But also, what about apprenticeship or other residential or, teacher preparation programs can we use to move forward? And what are some like public-private partnerships that we can potentially leverage to address this? This is something that I think that we can't kind of sit back and think like, oh, we're going to continue to have a shortage. We can't improve outcomes without instruction, and we can't provide effective instruction without appropriately trained and prepared educators and providers. So this is something that I'm really going to ask you as leaders, regardless of your role, to engage in those conversations, to really step back and look at your investments, talk to others, see what's working for them, see what could be replicated potentially, or what strategies you can put in place. This is something, though, that we can't continue to admire and wait for someone to fix. We have to make sure that we have the prepared staff, whether we grow them ourselves, whether we bring them in and train them on the job training. IDA has very specific requirements about the preparation of people providing these services. And it's something that we need to think about proactively, as well as how do we retain the people that we have currently.
100% agreed. Something that you talk about frequently, and really have been since you walked in the door, is instructional leadership. And we used to get a ton of questions about what does she mean when she says instructional leadership? And so you talked a little bit about that before. What does that look like for employees at state educational agencies? How can this support some of our youngest children? And what are the connections between instructional leadership and great outcomes?
Wow, Valerie, let's see how much we can pack into one question. I think I've already said it tonight, but we can't improve outcomes without talking about teaching and learning, without talking about instruction, and without knowing the evidence-based practices that have been shown to be effective, right? Peer-reviewed research, as well as evidence-based practices. What I worry about is that a lot of times as leaders, we delegate things to others that we don't feel comfortable wading in. And many of us have not been in a classroom as recently as people that are providing these services. And so how is it that we're making sure that we're still aligned, we're still aware of those practices, we're staying up to date on the evidence and the research, and we're making sure that we provide professional development opportunities, not only for our educators who are in the classroom to be able to learn about those and apply those, but how are we working with our educator prep programs to make sure that our teachers are coming out with those skills? How do we make sure that our systems are prepared to provide environments that support the implementation of those skills? And then how do we model the uncomfortable place that we sometimes have to be in to have conversations about something that we may not be the experts in? Whether that means partnering with somebody, in the Office of Elementary or Secondary Education, whether it means partnering with a teaching and learning colleague. But what I've been saying when I talk about instructional leadership is that as leaders, We have to set the expectation, and we have to show through our actions and modeling that we understand that we can't not talk. That was a lot of double negatives there. That it is impossible to expect to change outcomes when we never wade into these difficult conversations, these sometimes uncomfortable conversations. And so I've been asking those of us here at OSERS to model that, to expand our understanding, to look at the fabulous resources that have come out of the many TA centers, the ideas that work, the different platforms that already kind of evaluate the effectiveness of interventions and research. But then how is it that we really implement that at a state and local level? So going with how do we support our youngest children? I think it comes down to this. We have to start early. We have to set these expectations. Do we understand the developmental milestones and the standards? And that's standards from the earliest childhood through the school age. And when we're working with voc rehab, do we understand the expectations that they need to have in school to post-school transition? And are we working towards that? We can't continue to work in the system siloed, not only siloed special ed and general ed, but siloed between Part C, Part B, and voc rehab or post-secondary education. We really have to step forward and be uncomfortable to learn about each other and share things with each other and build a comprehensive system. I always think about it like, what is the system I want for myself, for my family, my children, my grandchildren when I have them? And I want a system that is really thoughtful about their needs and is responsive to those, not one that requires them to constantly start and stop and restart a process because we haven't thought through it as the leaders.
That makes perfect sense. And so in that, what role do you see families playing in improving outcomes, and what are possible opportunities for them to become engaged at the local and state level?
So I think for families, it's the same process, right? How do we engage in a system where sometimes we're experts and sometimes we're not experts? How do I show that I'm also a lifelong learner? How do I give and receive feedback? How do I show, that I don't understand, I may not be the expert, I may not understand everything, but I can engage in thoughtful conversations. I can help develop plans by providing my input. I can ask those questions. And so for families, I want it to be a safe environment to do so. And I want the same thing to happen for school staff or early intervention providers. Like, how do we set the stage for people to learn together and grow together? And when they know better, to do better together, rather than looking for those gotcha moments that cause us to retreat into, our shell, for lack of a better word.
Very true. Very true. Okay, I have a couple more questions for you, and then I'm going to wrap this up, even though I feel like we could go on and on and on. But I only have a couple more questions for you that I think would be helpful to those who are listening right now. In reference to our TA centers. So what is in your mind a hidden gem of a resource that an OSEP funded TA center has produced that you're excited about?
Oh my goodness, this is such a difficult question because there's so many. So I'm going to start like so broad, Valerie, but the placemat. And it's not a placemat anymore, right? Those of us who have been around a while remember when all of the TA centers were on like one large piece of paper, and now it's 4 different pieces of paper that describe the different types of TA centers. And so for me, that is one of the best resources that I can use, because I can pull it out and think like, okay, what are the TA centers that focus on data? What are the TA centers that focus on fiscal resources? What are the TA centers that are going to help me at a state level to improve my processes and outcomes, right? And I'm able to look at that list of TA centers and really dig into the ones that are going to address my specific needs, rather than having, to use all of them or access all of them or feeling like I do. The ones you asking me about a specific gem is almost like asking me who is my favorite child, right? Like it's so hard to be like, oh, this one thing. So I could probably run down the list and be like, this one did this, this one did this. But one of the things that I haven't talked a great deal about tonight is data. And those of you who know me know how I love data. And so I am going to say I am really excited about some of the work that is coming out of the TA centers specifically around data. We have the IDC that has been around for a long time, right? That helps us understand how to use data and how to make data-informed decisions. But we also have a brand new TA center that is the Rhonda Weiss Data Center around, and I'm butchering the name, which everyone who knows me knows I do this frequently, but it's around accessible data, making sure that data is accessible to people with disabilities, people who are blind or visually impaired. And this is a really exciting concept because a lot of times the way the data are provided online, even though there's 508 accessibility requirements, they're not able to access and manipulate the data in the same way that others can. And so this is pretty groundbreaking. The work that the Rhonda Weiss TA Center is going to be doing really help us not only to make data accessible to all at the same time, but really help us, I think, forge a pathway around some other accessibility pieces.
I like that. Okay, I have one more question for you as time is slowly wrapping up and ticking by. How do you see OSEP modeling collaboration with other agencies, and what's the value in that type of work? We talked a lot about partnership and collaboration today. So in your mind, where are we doing that? What could it look like? Where could we possibly be doing more of it? Because if we model at the federal level what we want to see at the state level, then I think it would be helpful to provide some ideas and some examples.
Right. So we definitely are really digging into partnering. You've heard at the beginning of this call of the partnership between OSEP and Voc Rehab. But also we have been working with the Department of Labor around employment, the WIOA Act, as well as state plans. We've been working with HHS around not only Medicaid, but also independent living, activities such as that. Working with CMS as part of HHS around Medicaid, but then also looking at different stakeholder groups. So looking at COPA, looking at small or Superintendents Association, National Association of State Directors of Special Ed, National Association of Federal Programs. I'm sure they have a different name now. Working with our data managers, our 619 coordinators, working with Part C providers and TA centers around that. Looking at dispute resolution, and then working with the Domestic Policy Council at the White House, looking at with Department of Justice, military connected youth, and children with disabilities. Those are all areas that we've been focused on. And then I think really looking at as we roll out draft regulations or policies, how is it that we engage stakeholders in providing comments and then making sure that we respond to those comments. So we recently had an IDEA NPRM around Medicaid consent. We received around 10,000 public comments. A great deal of them were from families of children with disabilities, as well as educators. And so kind of looking through those and identifying things that not only are responsive to what we're asking for comments, but also looking at bigger issues that were raised. And then OSEP has done a great deal of listening sessions with different stakeholders. I think it's fascinating. I jumped in really quickly to the Q&A, even though kind of that multitasking is hard. But I have tried really hard today to talk not only about the school age population and the adult age population going into the workforce, but part C, right? Making sure that we have those early intervention providers, that we have that family level engagement, and that we're providing resources to families through technical assistance, through Q&As that are written in a manner that are effective for them and encourage dialogue between them and their schools and their districts and their states, and then working with our parent training and information systems. I feel strongly that it takes all of us to build a better system, and that we all bring our own aspirations, our own opportunities, and our own background and perspectives, and that it's all of that that's going to help us really improve outcomes as we move forward.
And I see a heart going up. That is a perfect way to end. Oh, we have literally 2 minutes, so that was perfect. I want to thank you for your time today, because that was pretty much laying out a path for what your thoughts are, what direction we need to be headed in, what we all need to be thinking about, and having Carol and Dante get on to share what's going on and how we can further partner and collaborate, I think is critical. So I want to let everyone know who's watching, there will be other opportunities where you will see and hear from Glenna, as well as Carol and Dante, because we are all working very closely together. We have a serious sense of urgency, and we know that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So we're going to continue the good work. But we will continue to be responsive to you. We will continue to listen to your concerns to help support you and help strategize and work through some of the problems that you have. So I just want to thank everyone for being on today. This is being recorded. It will be made available. If something occurs to you later on and you have a question, please reach out. We would be more than happy to get you a resource, get your question answered, to be supportive, because that's what we're here for. So I want to thank everyone once again. Have a good evening, and we will be speaking with you soon.
Thank you, Valerie, for hosting, and also for modeling the collaboration that we hope to see between state education agencies and VR agencies, as well as with others.
More than welcome. Everyone have a great evening or afternoon, depending on where you are.